This morning, we're also talking to Professor Agnes Lucy Lando. She is, or rather has been elected to the Board of Directors of the International Communication Association, ICA. Her election is historic because she's the first African elected to the board and the first African to represent the African region as well. And to properly pronounce the full and say the full title is Sister Professor A.L. Lando. So Board of Directors of the International Communication Association. You're also currently with the Daystar University as Associate Professor of Communication and Media Studies and Assistant Head of Communication Department. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
This is huge. Talk to us about what International Communication Association is first.
The International Communication Association, ICA, is one of the largest body of communication professionals, academicians, researchers, and practitioners in the world. The headquarters is in Washington, D.C., and it has been in existence for the last 67 years.
Wow. And so some of the work involves also African continents, African and other continents in the world.
Yes, it involves the entire world because it's a world body of communication scholars and professionals and practitioners. And the greatest thing about this is that researchers from different parts of the world congregate annually to one part of the world, either in Europe or in the US or in Asia, to discuss matters academic, matters communication, matters research. But for the last 67 years, there has never been an African on that board.
Yeah.
And so Kenya makes history by producing the first African and the first sister to sit on that board.
Amazing stuff. So what, in your view, got you to edge everybody out in Africa who's part of this body to be able to sit in that board of directors?
Actually, the journey started in 2014 when Daystar University sponsored me to go and present a paper in Washington, Seattle. And while there, I noticed that I was very conspicuous because I was the only African, my color, and the only religious in that particular conference. And yet this was a global conference. And the one or two other Africans who were there are either incarnated in Europe or in the US. So during the General Assembly, and we're talking about 4,000 delegates plus from all over the world, I raised the question. I said, this is very important. We're discussing serious matters communication, serious matters academic, serious matters research, and it is global. Yet Africa is underrepresented here.
Right.
Yet we also have the brains, we also have the capacity, we conduct researches. Why is Africa underrepresented here? And then the assembly maybe thought that probably ICA was not well known in the continent. So I was given the task of trying to popularize ICA in the continent and also encourage other communication scholars and researchers to come on board. Right. So that was in Washington, Seattle. The following year, 2015, I went to the same conference in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Again, thanks to Daystar, who supported my travel and my expenses to the conference. Still, the same issue was raised there. The presence of African communication scholars was still negligible. And I had been given from Washington, Seattle, 2 years to convince ICA that indeed we have the capacity to host an international conference in the continent. So when I came back, I began to discuss that with Daystar University, and the communication department took it up and said, yes, we shall support hosting an international conference in the continent. And so when I went back to San Juan, Puerto Rico in 2015, we picked it up, and the delegates and the executive board said, yes, if there's possibility and there's capacity, we would be willing to host such a conference in the continent.
And it was the first.
It was the first ever International Communication Association conference in the continent of Africa, and the venue was Kenya in Nairobi at Daystar University. And this happened 2 years later, which was October 2016, this year.
Yeah. So your first meeting there, you go and put it to them. How do you call yourself global, yet there is an African representation? You get a challenge, you get onto it, get a meeting, global meeting to be held here. Now that you're in the board, what are you looking to do to advance, especially the place of Africa in terms of this kind of interactions?
The first thing to do is to help the African voice to get out there. You know, there's a lot of good communication, research, scholarship that's going on in Africa, but that is not reported or presented worldwide because we are not where decisions are being made. So by the mere fact that for the first time in 67 years, ICA held a regional conference in Africa, in Nairobi, in Kenya, was in itself a mark that African scholars are actually interested, because we had more than 300 delegates from all over the world, majority from the African continent, congregating here in Nairobi.
Right.
So one of my responsibilities is to bring the African voice, African communication scholars and researchers to that body, so that our views, the African story, can be told by Africans. The other thing is, there's a lot of researches that are being done in the continent of Africa by other scholars from other continents. So we can collaborate. Instead of them traveling all over to come to Africa to conduct the researches, we can be able to do the primary research, data collection for them. We collaborate together. Then we present the data to them and they can analyze. So there's that kind of partnership. And also to expose African scholars to the international scene. You see, DASTA, for example, places a lot of emphasis and resources on research, scholarship, and also conferences. And so they support me to go to these conferences. But not all universities or not all Africans have that special possibility. And so when I was out in Washington, Seattle, in San Juan, Puerto Rico, Fukuoka, Japan, last year, I said the good that is here, how can I bring it to the continent, so that those men and women who are into research and scholarship and are not able to travel to these distant countries can also have that experience locally. And that is what is happening.
Right. And it's good that you mentioned that Africans get the opportunity to tell their story, because for a long time, a lot of the sentiments that have been gotten from especially Africans watching how the African story is being viewed even by the rest of the world is from a perspective that it is not really by an insider, it's an outsider. So it's great you're doing that. For somebody watching this and asking themselves, so what does ICA do for me? So these scholars come together, they congregate, they meet. What do I stand to benefit? Who benefits from the work of ICA?
Literally everyone benefits from the work of ICA. One, researchers and scholars will benefit because they meet and discuss academic matters at that level. And you meet, for example, like we had the conference here in DASTA in October, people were able to meet authors. We've been citing books, journal articles of someone from Timbuktu or someone from Japan, and you've never met them before. So this conference brings you face to face with such people. So the scholars would benefit in that way and also share ideas in how to advance the discipline. Now, for other people who are not scholars or researchers, you know, research is basically trying to solve common problems using simple ideas, but using profound methods. So if there's a problem or there's a challenge in society of whatever nature, and people get involved in research, they get involved in studies, the results that come out of that benefit everyone. You can do a research on maybe tribalism, you can do a research on traffic jams, you can do studies on certain trends that are taking place. And the result will benefit not just the researcher, but also the community that are involved or live in that particular place.
Yeah, and before we wrap this up, in terms of Kenya and the political landscape, sorry to rope you into that, but communication, because many a times we see that get rather confrontational. We see communication not happening. It's talking at each other and not with each other. What, from an expert point of view, would you say we need to exercise more, especially in our political circles?
In terms of political matters, I would call for sobriety. Communication is basically talking and listening. There is a time when I talk and you listen. There's a time when you talk and I listen. So there's that necessity that even in the political arena, in all aspects of life actually, that communication be taken seriously so that we give each other an opportunity to air out the ideas. We can discuss, we can disagree, we can agree, but there must be an opportunity for me to put out that which I have within me, and then I also listen to you.
Yeah.
So for politicians, it's important that we listen to each other and not talk to each other, or talk at each other.
At each other. And as an alumnus of Daystar University, I'm personally proud of you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And of course, we wish you the very best with your work. We'll be watching and cheering you on.
Thank
you for
very
coming
much.
to KTN News. Sister Professor A.L. Lando, Board of Directors of the International Communication Association. That is her new job. We wish you the very best. Thank you.
Thank you very much.